In 1985, the world was locked in a stalemate between East and West. Two superpowers stare at each other across an invisible line of fear and ideology. A single step in the wrong direction would have sparked global catastrophe. Nuclear war wasn't just a distant threat, it was real in people's minds because the world had not forgotten the disastrous effect of atomic bombs on Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. And then, from the heart of the Soviet Union, a man rises who will pull levers no one thought could change, and begin to unravel this whole uneasy balance. That man is Mikhail Gorbachev. What he would do in the years ahead would shock friend and foe alike and tilt the world toward peace in ways nobody expected. When Gorbachev became leader of the Soviet Union in March 1985, he inherited a superpower that looked strong on paper but was crumbling from within. Factories were outdated, technology lagged far behind the West, food and consumer goods were scarce, and the heavy burden of military spending was draining the Soviet economy dry. The Soviet Union was a global giant standing on cracked foundations. People were tired, and faith in the Communist Party's promises was fading. Gorbachev recognized something most of his predecessors refused to see: the system wasn't just inefficient, it was unsustainable. And if something drastic wasn't done, the entire structure could collapse. So he did what no one before him had dared to do: he decided to change the system from within. His solution came into bold words: Glasnost and Perestroika. Glasnost meant openness. It was about freeing speech, loosening censorship, and allowing people to talk about problems that had been buried under silence for decades. For the first time, ordinary Soviet citizens could criticize the government, question history, and demand accountability. Perestroika meant restructuring. It was about fixing the broken Soviet economy by introducing limited market mechanisms, encouraging private initiative, and giving factories more autonomy instead of controlling everything from Moscow. These ideas were revolutionary in a country where questioning the state could once get you sent to a labor camp. Hardliners in the Communist Party called it madness. Local officials feared losing their power. But for ordinary people, it felt like the first breath of fresh air after decades of suffocation. Newspapers began printing real stories, people debated politics in the streets, and truth, raw, painful truth, started surfacing. Gorbachev believed this openness would save socialism by renewing its credibility. But in reality, it unleashed a storm no one could stop. As Gorbachev shook things up at home, he also began changing how the Soviet Union dealt with the rest of the world. For decades, the Cold War had been driven by suspicion and the belief that only military strength could guarantee survival. The Soviet Union poured its money into weapons, nuclear missiles, and ideological wars abroad. Gorbachev thought differently. He introduced what he called new thinking in foreign policy. He argued that security should not come from confrontation but from cooperation. He began reducing military spending and pulling troops out of conflicts like Afghanistan. And most importantly, he ended the old Soviet idea that Moscow had the right to control the governments of Eastern Europe. Before Gorbachev, if a socialist state in Eastern Europe tried to move away from the Soviet line, the Kremlin sent tanks. But under Gorbachev, that doctrine quietly died. Western journalists called it the Sinatra Doctrine, meaning every nation could do it their way. That small change in philosophy would later reshape the map of Europe. Meanwhile, on the world stage, Gorbachev sought peace. He met with U.S. Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush in a series of tense but historic summits. These meetings weren't friendly at first. Both sides came armed with suspicion. At the 1986 Reykjavik summit, negotiations almost collapsed completely, but the discussions opened a door. The next year, Gorbachev and Reagan signed the INF Treaty, the first agreement to actually eliminate a whole class of nuclear weapons. It was an extraordinary shift, the two greatest enemies agreeing to disarm. Then came the Malta Summit in 1989, where Gorbachev and Bush declared that the Cold War was effectively over. It was the end of an era, not through war, but through words. The world had just witnessed something extraordinary. a superpower choosing diplomacy over domination. But the real test of Gorbachev's vision came at home and across Eastern Europe. The loosening of Soviet control sent shockwaves through the communist bloc. People in Poland, Hungary, East Germany, and Czechoslovakia began demanding freedom. Protesters filled streets. Communist governments started to crumble one after another. In the past, the Soviet Union would have sent in troops. But this time, Gorbachev refused to intervene. He let history take its course. And then came that unforgettable moment. In November 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. East Germans poured through the checkpoints, climbing the wall that had divided their lives for nearly 30 years. People hugged, cried, celebrated. The symbol of the Cold War literally came down. And for the first time, no Soviet tanks rolled in to stop it. That single decision by Gorbachev changed the destiny of Europe. He could have crushed the revolutions in Eastern Europe, but he didn't. His restraint ended the Cold War in spirit as much as in politics. But while the world applauded him, back in Moscow, things were spinning out of control. Glasnost had given people the courage to speak, and now they were shouting. Nationalism flared in the Soviet republics, the Baltic states, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, all demanding independence. The Soviet economy, once tightly managed, was now collapsing under the weight of confusion. Factories closed, shelves emptied, and inflation soared. People's lives grew harder, not easier. Many began blaming Gorbachev himself. Within the Communist Party, hardliners plotted against him, calling him a traitor who had destroyed socialism. Reformers, on the other hand, said he wasn't moving fast enough. Stuck between two angry worlds, Gorbachev struggled to hold things together. In August 1991, a group of hardliners launched a coup. They placed Gorbachev under house arrest in his holiday home in Crimea. Tanks rolled into Moscow. The coup seemed ready to restore the old order. But it failed spectacularly when thousands of citizens, led by Boris Yeltsin, took to the streets and refused to back down. The world watched as ordinary Russians faced down the army. The old regime broke apart before everyone's eyes. When Gorbachev returned to Moscow after the failed coup, it was clear that the Soviet Union was finished. Within months, one republic after another declared independence. On December 25, 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev resigned as president of a country that no longer existed. The next day, the Soviet flag was lowered over the Kremlin for the last time. The Cold War was officially over. The world had changed forever. Gorbachev had set out to reform the Soviet system, to save it. But in trying to fix it, he had unlocked forces that destroyed it instead. He hadn't planned for collapse, but his reforms made it inevitable. Still, he achieved something no one else could. He ended the world's most dangerous standoff without bloodshed. Looking back, Gorbachev's legacy is complicated but profound. On one hand, he brought openness, reduced nuclear threats, and allowed millions in Eastern Europe to taste freedom. On the other hand, his reforms unleashed economic chaos and political instability that scarred a generation. History remembers him both as a visionary and as a tragic reformer who changed too much too quickly, or perhaps not quickly enough. Yet one truth stands firm: he changed the world through ideas, not weapons. His courage lay in restraint, in refusing to use violence when he easily could have. At the height of power, he chose peace over fear, dialogue over dominance. That's something few leaders in history can claim. The Cold War didn't end because one side defeated the other, it ended because one leader chose to step back from the edge. Gorbachev's story is a reminder that real strength is not always about crushing opposition. Sometimes it's about having the courage to let go. It's about realizing that people and nations can't be forced to think alike, they must be allowed to find their own path. His journey also shows the limits of idealism. Change sounds noble, but once you open the door to freedom, you can't control how far it goes. Gorbachev learned that truth the hard way. His openness inspired people, but also exposed cracks that had long been hidden. Yet without him, those walls might still stand, and the world might still live in the shadow of nuclear fear. Even today, decades later, his legacy whispers through the halls of history. Every time nations choose negotiation over war, every time leaders choose openness over secrecy, they echo his vision. And though his own country grew ambivalent toward him, the rest of the world remembers him as the man who made peace possible. So what can we take away from Gorbachev's story? It's simple: real change demands courage. True power lies in knowing when to hold back. And sometimes, the bravest act a leader can take is to listen, to talk, and to trust that people will rise when given the chance. The Cold War ended not with a victory parade, but with an act of humility, a superpower laying down its arms. That's the kind of story the world rarely tells, but desperately needs to remember. If this story made you think, hit the like button, share it with someone who loves history, drop a comment below with your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that changed the world.